Hello everyone, my name is Luis and I am a junior Java developer. And today I'll be showing you guys how to create a Jenkins CI/CD pipeline for a Spring Boot application, building it using a Maven wrapper. So the reason why we would want to use a CI/CD pipeline and what essentially a CI/CD pipeline is basically a sequence of, automated steps and stages that allows, continuous integration, testing, and, you know, deployment of that application using a software called Jenkins, which is known as an automation server, providing a, streamlined and repeatable process for building, testing, and delivering software updates. Now, when we want to create a Jenkins CI/CD pipeline, we first need to, have a server that's going to be handling that. And in this tutorial, we're going to be using AWS. So we're going to spin up a virtual machine on AWS. If you don't have an account, I encourage you to create an account. Now, for those that do not know what AWS is, AWS is a cloud computing platform that provides a wide range of services and tools for building, deploying, and managing various applications and services over the internet. And it's personally one of my favorite cloud companies, honestly. So with that being said, we are going to navigate to AWS. I already have it open. So if you guys don't have an account, create one and log into it. And your screen should look something like this or similar. So what we want to do is spin up a virtual machine. Now, AWS has a load of services they provide, and we want to go into compute. Now, in compute, we have virtual servers in the cloud, which is EC2. Click on that. Okay, so in here you would have all these, auto-scaling groups, and I won't go into detail what all of this is. Mainly, the only one I probably will talk about is key pairs and security groups. So when you want to launch an instance, I encourage you first to kind of map out what web traffic is going to be going into that server. So for example, if you're trying to run your application on port 8080, you want to define that in the rules of this server. And as well, if we're going to be interacting with it, you need to, create rules for it to be able to engage on that port that, we use a terminal for, which is SSH or port 22. We are going to create a security group, and these are all security groups that I've had. So I will delete some of these. Give me a sec. Okay, so two of them will be deleted. Now if I refresh, I should be only having two. So we're going to create a new security group and give it a name. So we're going to call it Jenkins traffic, and defines inbound and outbound traffic for the server. The VPC number is the same. Now in here, we're going to have, some inbound rules. Let's leave it like this. Give me a sec. What is the default security groups tag? So inbound rules are okay. All right. So back to our security group again. Create one. Sorry. So Jenkins rules. And now the outbound rules is going to be all, and we're going to add a new inbound rule. We're going to select one called SSH, and typically you won't want it to be from any IP, but in this case, I will be allowing it in IPv4, or I could just do have it like this, and add another one, SSH. We're gonna do it from IPv6, and we're gonna define a custom TCP, and we're gonna give it port 8080. We're gonna be able to access it from IPv4 addresses, and the same thing with this one, but 8081. And we're gonna do IPv6. Now, the reason why we do IPv6 and IPv4 is kind of a story in itself. So when the internet was created, they didn't anticipate that there was going to be billions of devices that were going to be able to communicate over the internet. And as the internet grew, there was a shortage on IPs because every device that connects onto the internet must have its own IP address. So as users grew, they were running out of IPv4 addresses, which are the original ones. So IPv6 was created in order for them to, have more IPs for devices. That's why you would find some funky looking IP addresses that don't match these old looking ones. So that's where IPv6 comes from. Now, after we have that, that is it for the rules. And we're going to create a security group. Now, we have that. We're going to go into key pairs. Now, let me delete these keys here, as I don't need them anymore. Create the new key pair. We're going to call it, we call it whatever, Jenkins access. Access key. You're going to do RSA and you're going to do .pem. And we're going to create the pair and it's going to download. Now, keep in mind where this is at. You might have to drag it into your desktop right now, and I'll show you why. So once we have that, let's go ahead and go back to the EC2 dashboard. We're going to go to launch instance. We're going to go launch instance. And you could call this, your Jenkins server. Now, I personally like to use Ubuntu for this, but as you can see, there's many, flavors of Linux that you could choose from. I typically like to go with the free tier volume. And for the instance type, I would usually get it a little bit bigger since this is an automation. It might be overkill, but my experience with, smaller ones made them freeze and render the virtual machine useless. So that's something you might want to keep in mind. The demand that you give the server. Um, Now for the login key pair, you're gonna select that key pair that we made. And for security group, you're going to select an existing one and select Jenkins traffic, which is also the security group that we created. And pretty much everything stays the same. You want one instance of it, and you're just gonna hit launch. Okay, so now that we have our instance running, and you will see, oh, it says 0, but hang on, if you get into this menu really fast, it's not running, it's building it. As you can see, no running is equal to take that off and you'll be able to see your Jenkins server. And you can see it's pending still. So just give it some time, let it boot up. And in the meantime, let's get that RSA, let's get that key that we need to get. So I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to test it more. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab and drag here. Now, when this refreshes, it's still pending. So we need to have it first, boot up. Sometimes it's, instant, sometimes it's not. So we just have to wait. There you go. See, it's running now. And we're gonna go to connect. And under SSH client, we're going to copy this command. Okay, so we're gonna go into here. Now we're gonna get out of this browser and remember this file that I dragged over to my desktop. We are going to left click on the desktop window. I'm gonna move over to terminal and we're gonna paste in that command that we just copied. And we're going to press enter. And if it asks you if you want to, add this, you're just gonna type in yes. Okay. If your screen looks like this, you have successfully connected to your EC2 instance on AWS. So you're connected to your virtual machine now. So in here, we're going to be running a series of commands to get the server, prepped already with Java, Jenkins, and Docker. Now, if you don't know what Docker is, um, Docker is like a big, player when it comes to containerization technology. Um, Now, what containers are, it's basically like an app on your phone. The technical definition, or at least a definition where it's to the point, it could be container image is a pre-built read-only template that includes all necessary files, libraries, dependencies required to run on a containerized application or service, which can be easily shared, distributed, and deployed across various environments and platforms. So if we build our application using that Docker, um, we could essentially distribute it and another person in another company can run that same, you know, application, and it's universal. Think of it as like apps on your phone, you know. Your model could run it, let's say for Android, you have one app on one type of phone and then you distribute it for another type, it's running the same type of environment. You're able to run both and communicate to a server. That's how an application kind of works in short terms. But back to this whole thing, we are going to be setting it up now. There are going to be a few commands that you're going to have to, run, and I highly suggest that you just copy and paste. Um, and I'll try to explain what these commands do as I go. So first one is, you know, upgrade the system because there's no dependencies on it. So if we upgrade it, it will refresh all those dependencies that allows us to install these applications on the server. So we do sudo apt upgrade, and we actually it's not upgrade, I'm sorry, it's update, and we press enter. Now, after this command, we're going to do a sudo apt upgrade, and we're going to give it the -y flag so it won't prompt us to if we want to install it or not. So just go directly into upgrading, and this command will actually update your entire system. Press enter and just let it roll. All right, let it complete. All right, we're just gonna, if you get to something like this, all we got to do is just press enter and just press enter again. And that takes care of the upgrade on the system. So moving on, we can install OpenJDK. Now, if you don't know what OpenJDK is, OpenJDK is essentially a free and open source implementation of the Java development kit. The JDK provides, the necessary tools and, runtime environment for developing, Java applications. So with that said, let's move on to installing it, and we're going to do it with this command. We're going to do sudo apt install and then open JDK -17-JDK. And again with the Y flag, so it won't prompt us. It will just go straight to install. Press enter. Now for these next commands, I highly encourage you to, copy and paste since these are from the official pages. Now, these next series of steps is basically a way for us to incorporate the libraries and dependencies so we can install that application, because as the system sits right now, it doesn't have those. So if we try to just go straight into, let's say, sudo apt install Jenkins, it's not going to know where to get it from because there's nothing to point to. So with that, I'm going to be copying the first command, and all these commands will be put in the description for you guys. It's a lot easier access to these, so just copy and paste. So this is the first command, and if you don't get any any errors, that means it's good and it went through, and all you have to do is just re-update your packages with sudo apt update. And as you can see, Jenkins is in there now. And now if you run sudo apt install, and then we do Jenkins, we do the -y. So if you just go into install, it's going to install. All right, let it do what it needs to do. Okay, enter again. Now that we have Jenkins installed, you might, nah, let's just move forward. Okay, so once we have that, we need to install the dependencies for Docker. So for that, we're going to be running a series of these commands, which is this one. Okay. And we're going to be running these commands. Again, if you don't get any output, that's okay. That's a good sign. Now we're going to introduce the actual libraries. I'm going to press enter again. And now we have to update the apt-get repository. So we do that with this command. And we go ahead and create a folder for the GPG Docker. And we go ahead and update it one more time. And we go ahead and install the actual Docker command. Well, to actually install Docker, this is the command. Sorry. First time making a tutorial, so bear with me. We're going to enter. Let this install. In the meantime, press enter, enter. Now that we have that installed, we're going to go ahead and add ourselves to the Docker group, so we don't have to be running sudo docker and whatever command we use. It's just the straight Docker and whatever we need. So we're going to add that to it, and we're also going to add the Jenkins user, because remember, all of the processes that go in Jenkins are automated. And the user that does those commands basically on the system is the Jenkins user. Jenkins. Add that to it. Now we have to add Jenkins to the group of sudoers, so they were able to run this sudo command. Now this is a security risk. I'm gonna say right now. There's a more safer way on doing this. You just have to like dig to find it, but to get it to work for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just gonna give it full-on sudo permissions for anything. And the way I do that is by navigating or editing the sudoers file. And the way we would go about, editing a file would be the nano command. Now, where this file lives, it lives in a folder called etc. This folder contains, configuration files for a lot of applications that are on your your server. So for example, if you do ls, which stands for list, and then we do -l for list, and then we do, etc, and we do that, and we just press enter, you will see all the folders that live on that directory. And if, for example, we wanted to go to, let's go to an easy one. Let's go to apt. Okay. So we want to go into that apt folder. We'll do cd etc apt, and you'll be in that apt folder, and you'll be able to see what's in there. So cd just by itself brings you back to your home directory, and cd// will bring you one directory down. So I'm in Ubuntu. I'm in the home directory of Ubuntu, of the user Ubuntu. So one shortcut to learn right now is to clear the terminal, and that is with Control L, and it will refresh everything for you. So we want to edit that sudo file. So we're going to do sudo, because since this is a system file, we need high permissions. We're going to do nano to edit, and we're going to plug in where this file lives. So etc/sudoers. It might tell you that it is meant to be read-only, but that's okay. Just using the up and down arrows, navigate to the bottom, and go ahead and add this to the end. Okay, once that's done, Control S to save it, and Control X to exit. So now that we have all that in, now we have to install Docker Compose. So let's go into Docker Compose and let's install it. And if you ever looking to learn how to install applications other than what I just showed you, usually Googling will kind of help you and guide you. You see, like this one says step 1 install. All you have to do is just literally copy the commands into your server, and they'll run. And we're going to give it permissions to run. Give it an executable flag. And we are going to copy the version to make sure that it is installed. And it is installed. Perfect. We're going to clear the terminal. And now that we have all that installed, I will be able to show you guys how to set up the pipeline. Now, that reminds me, we still need to log into the application. So now that we have all that installed, I was going sideways, you guys, I'm sorry. Now that we have all that installed, we have to, access that instance. Okay, so remember, if you want to connect to the page that it's running on, it's usually the IP address. And if you wanted to find the IP address, you would go into your EC2 dashboard. The ones that are running, you're going to click on the ID of it, and you should see public IP4. Now what you want to do is copy that address, and in your web browser, you want to type in HTTP, and then you do // and then you're going to type in the IP of it, and you're going to do 8080, and you're just going to type enter. And that should bring you to the login page of your Jenkins server. Now, to find the password, we're going to have to copy this command, and before you paste, we're going to do sudo cat which stands for concatenate. Basically, what it does is it outputs what's on that file. So if the password is stored in a file with this directory, running this command will give you the contents of that file. And as you see, it gives us the password. We go ahead and copy with Control C, and we go back to our Jenkins page, and we just copy and paste. Don't save, and you're just gonna install the suggested plugins. All right, that's gonna let it go. Now, this is a good time to explain how this pipeline works and how does Docker play into this, and your whole Spring Boot application folder plays into all of this. So this is the project that we had to create. It was basically a money transfer application, where if you guys are familiar with like Venmo, this is kind of like a mock of it, a stripped down mock of it. And every time we would push, features to a repo, we had to, download it and, compile it and run it. What essentially the pipeline does for us is it's basically we lay out a series of steps in a Jenkins file within your project. So if you're in your directory and you just, put new file and then you call it Jenkinsfile, you're able to define a series of steps that the server will execute and essentially build. It will literally clone, test, and build your application, and also deploy it to a running Docker container. Now, I have this pipeline built where it builds using this command. So this command will execute in the directory of your folder, and it will execute this one. For you guys, I highly recommend that if you guys are running this on Windows or anything non-Linux related, watch your guys' line spacing and make sure that it's not CRLF. Make sure it's only LF. The reason being is that due to those line spacings, when this server or this bash script runs on your server or this Linux environment, the Windows line spacers are different than Linux. And that will, cause a, syntax error within your application. Now, there are ways around this where you could, in your actual server, you would essentially navigate to where this directory, where your project lives within the server, and convert that script, this mvmw script, using a tool called DOS. I believe it's DOS to Unix, and it's application that you install on your terminal. So that's just something to keep in mind. That's something that I came across when I was actually building this, CI/CD pipeline. So, errors, you'll learn a lot of things. So this essentially is just going to run this script in this, and it's just going to ignore the tests because I really don't need, testing right now. We're still building. Or you kind of say we do need tests, but for the sake of this, tutorial, I decided not to include them. Now, I'm pretty sure I don't need this flag. This was, given to me when I was debugging why wasn't this working. So I might just delete that and see if that won't work. Now, the next stage, what it does is verifies an artifact. So when this command runs, it's going to output a jar file. That jar file is what's being able to be executed. So if you run this from your local, if you run this within IntelliJ, IntelliJ will build it out and run that jar file for you in its little run terminal here. This, what it does is it basically verifies that that command is outputting that jar file. Now, if it's found, it will go into something called a Docker file. Now, essentially what a Docker file is a text file that contains instructions for building, a Docker image, including, what base image used to run in. So it could be like Ubuntu, it could be Java, it could be, there's a lot of images out there that you could use. But essentially, since we need a Java image to run this application, we're going to use, a Java one. So it uses the necessary dependencies to install and commands to run when the container is started. Now, the way it does that using a Docker image. Now, a container image or a Docker image is a pre-built and read-only template that includes all the necessary files and libraries and dependencies required to run a specific application or service, which can be easily shared, distributed, or deployed across, various environments. Um, all of that will go into something called a Docker Compose. Now, the Docker Compose is more like the networking aspect and like, the how can I put it? It's more like the infrastructure part of it. Dockerfile, what it does is it basically is the foundation, and the Docker Compose is more like the stuff that goes on top of the foundation, like your ports, what you define a lot of things in here. Now, um, with this, it basically states some environmental variables that you will need in your Docker container. So this is basically a precursor that says, oh, um, this is the services and networks and volumes that we're going to need. And we're going to specify how they should be configured and connected to each other. So in this one, what it does is going to build a new service, and it's going to run basically that jar file, and it's going to give a name called container, or I'm sorry, not container. It's going to give the container name called Tenmo, my app, and it's going to be able to run on port 8081. We're also going to give it a data source URL, so it could pull it from here. And this what essentially is going to do is going to create this section here. What it's going to do, it's basically going to create the database that we needed for the application to work. So if your application needs a database to run along with it and using Spring Boot, this is a pretty good template to use, honestly. You could just change, the database name, the Postgres IDs and all that, and you could, manipulate it for your ways. You could leave this init SQL, and what is it basically is basically the way the database is going to be structured, what tables need to be created, what keys and all that stuff that goes into creating a database that will be included in this file. And again, you don't have to delete it if your application needs a database. I would just copy and paste that into this init and run it. So the reason why you need these files is that when you push this up to a GitHub repository, what Jenkins does is that it pulls your a copy of your repository, and it puts it through those series of steps that I just showed you. Now, the first step is to actually pull. So that's going to pull from your GitHub. The next step is defined as the first step in my Jenkins file, which is to build. That's going to build, the jar, and from there it's just going to keep going until it fully deploys. So if you get to this menu, you could create a user account if multiple people are going to be managing this pipeline. but since if it's just you, just skip for now. Keep in mind that this is the URL for your Jenkins, um, where it's living, and you're going to need this in order to set up something known as a GitHub webhook. So keep in mind that you will need this. Again, you could get it from up here as well. So save and finish. Still using Jenkins. Now that that's good, we are going to create a new item, and we're going to call it Jenkins. Just gonna call it Jenkins, or just give it a name. Pipe. All right. Let's hit OK. And here it's just going to be, a description of what the pipeline is or does, or you could just add whatever you like. So whatever. What? So stuff you want to take is GitHub project, and you need to put in the project URL, and for that it would be this URL. So this is where your project lives, and you're just going to plug that URL into your server side. Okay, into that there. Build triggers, and you're going to hit GitHub trigger for Git SCM polling. Now, what this does is it basically accepts a post request from GitHub saying, okay, there's a new version of, there's a new push, somebody pushed, and I want you to build a new version of the application implementing that, what was changed in that build. So this happens automatically with this. And I'll show you how to set this up from the GitHub webhook side. Now, the next one is the pipeline. Pipeline, we're able to define that same script that we had in the Jenkins file that we had here. So we could literally just copy and paste that in there, and it would run the same way. But since we already have it incorporated in our, um, pipeline, or in our pipeline, I mean our project, we could just do pipeline script from SCM, SCM, and we're gonna do Git. And right here, we need the GitHub repository. Here is we're actually going to use the .git URL. Okay. Now, credentials, none. Okay. We need to add credentials in order for Jenkins to be able to access this repository. If you're the owner of this repository, you could just enter the same credentials that you would use to log into GitHub. So we will go to add Jenkins. In my case, this is my password, give it an IP, GitHub, Jenkins. There's a more secure way to do this without, you putting your passwords and usernames, and that's with a username and SSH key. Now that in itself is a little bit more tedious to set up since you're dealing with SSH keys. I would try to make a video on that later on and see if I could get it to work. And if I do, I'll let you guys know. But we could just essentially add this right now for the meantime. And we select again our things. Now it's saying from what branch to specify from. We're going to specify it from our main. So that's where our repo is at. And we're going to set that to the same thing, script file, Jenkins. All right, we're going to hit save. Okay. Now, since we haven't pushed anything, okay, so this is a good time now to set up the the Git, the way the trigger works with GitHub. So we're gonna go into settings. And remember that IP address that I told you guys that your Jenkins lives on? You're gonna go down to settings, and then to the side right here, you're gonna go down to webhooks, and then you're just gonna hit edit. And it's gonna prompt you for your password. So you're just gonna do that, put it in. Okay. Now, here, you're gonna replace this with the IP address of your Jenkins server. So I'm gonna copy and paste that, and I'm gonna paste it here. Okay, make sure that there's no double thing, and it looks something like this, but with this incorporated as your own. You're gonna hit application JSON, and you're just gonna hit update webhook. You're gonna go into the pipeline here, and notice how there's no builds, right? And we set up the hook so it's able to just make sure it's okay. Okay, it's able to, accept a trigger. Let's go ahead and make a change in this folder, in this Jenkins project. So if we try to, let's say, put a new stage here, verify artifact, verify, let's change this to build, verify build gives a .jar file. Okay, in our Docker file, we have, this is basically the image that I was talking about that, the Docker image gets created from the base. This basically what it does is it says, okay, copy, you know, so when your application gets built, it's the output of it is a jar file. That jar file gets stored in the project's target folder when it gets built. And in our case, the name of our jar file is, capstone, snapshot.jar. So this is what's going to do is you're going to copy that jar into the directory of our container, and it's going to call it app.jar. This one does the same thing, except it copies the applications property file from our project into a folder within the container called app, and it's just going to paste the application properties in it. And the way that the Docker containers initialize is with this entry point, and these are just the arguments that run the actual server within the container. So that's just a little rundown of the Dockerfile if I forgot to explain it. But essentially, with all that, it's going to build, it's going to say this, since that's what we changed. So you saw what it was prior. Now, we're just going to commit, like if there was a regular, change to the project. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit -a. And we're just going to do the controller. We're just going to do changed a stage on the Jenkins script. Let's hit enter. And let's push the change into the server. Now, if the GitHub webhook was correctly initialized, we should see it start building or being queued for build. I don't know why it's not there. Let's go to see recent deliveries. Okay, this was recently delivered. Let's go in here. Okay, so there's no polls yet. So that's good. Let's go ahead and redeliver this one. So sometimes you might need to like initialize it a little bit. Seems like it's not going. Okay, let's go ahead and redeliver. Let's go ahead and redeliver this payload. Finally, it accepts it. I'm going to hit build now. Okay, so it's gonna build and it's gonna display right now all the stuff going on in it. So you see that this basically pulls from the repository, GitHub repository. This stage builds it, so it's gonna run that build command like I told you. It's gonna verify that it gives you, it's gonna stop previous containers, remove any images that were previously made, and it's gonna create the container and deploy it. So it's gonna start the 10mo app and create the database along with it. So if we go into the terminal output, you should see all those instructions of the pipeline, that were executed. So it looks for the file, the artifact was found. This is a command that starts a script within the application itself that stops any containers or that were previously made. And if it doesn't, it just tells you that it's not there and it moves on to the next stage. Um, the Docker image does not exist, so it's just going to create a new one. It's loading the definition from the Dockerfile. It's giving it the base image. It's copying that jar file to the app. You see right here that the property is getting loaded in. You can see it's pulling the database image to run a Docker container version of Postgres, and it's creating a database. The 10mo app is done, and it finished with a success. So if we go back into here, and let's say we want to test our application, we could use Postman here, and I have an endpoint on it called register. Now register, you could register a user on it. If we do here, HTTP, and then we do register. Register. We go into body, we go into raw, and this is the password that I'm incorporated with. And if the server is alive and well and able to handle requests, the application is living, I should be able to see a 202 or a 201 here, or 200. One of those success codes has to be here. And I get a forbidden. Powered by Jetty. And that is because I am running it on port 8080, and it's port 8081 where the application is. So I do that. And let it go. Okay, terminal start again. Let's try one more time. Let me check if the Docker container is alive. Docker PS. Docker Postgres, and we have the application running 10mo app. Okay. What could be causing it not to work? Right here. Give me a sec, guys. Jenkins pipeline. Okay, that finished successfully. Yes, this is a no, that's the correct where this is taking. Hang on, you guys, I'm sorry. Um, that was one. Yes, that's good. Go ahead and rerun the pipeline. See what happens in this build. So it's going, it's going. Okay. Successfully created the pipeline. Okay, frames. Interesting. Okay. Actually runs it, so um, no, zero top. Started about a minute ago. I don't know where. Okay, TCP. Okay, why doesn't this want to work? It's up and running. Let's go into our pipeline in here. So yeah, essentially, I don't know why it's not, letting me communicate with it. I know I have the correct ports open. Correct security groups is done. For some reason, it's hiccuping today. It doesn't want to, you know, cooperate. This is not found. When this happens is usually due to the security group on the EC2 server. Usually we should check the security group and make sure it's running fine. That could explain it. We never added the IPv6 variants of this. So we're gonna go ahead and add 80, 80, 80. And do custom IPv6. And we're gonna do 81, and we're gonna do custom IPv4. And we're gonna go ahead and save those rules. Okay, so when you guys do this again, just make sure that you guys have IPv4 and IPv6. And this is exactly the same reason why. So you see now that I fixed that, I'm able to get that response from the server. Now to demonstrate and see if this actually builds automatically, we're going to change something in the project and add a new controller, because if we go to this endpoint, hello, we don't get it because it doesn't exist on the project. So we go in here and we go into source main Java controller. Let's go ahead and add a new Java class, and we're going to call it hello. We're going to go ahead and add it, and we're going to give it an annotation as a REST controller. And if it doesn't exist on it, go ahead and import it. Alt enter, and we're going to give it a path request mapping. Give it the mapping of let's give it the mapping of /hello. So that's what we're trying to access. Now, if we were to push this and say, okay, public, string, because we wanted to say hello back, we're going to give it greeting. And we're not accepting any parameters in there. We're just going to have return string, call it hello string. Give it an add to get mapping to it. So this new controller will allow us to access this via post, and you'll see that it will get built all by itself and not need to interact with it. So we're going to go ahead and see the status. So we're going to add it, and we're going to go ahead and commit updated project, and we're going to go ahead and push it. Now that should trigger the build process. And as you see, it triggered it by itself because there was a change. There was no changes in these. And it's going to start building a pipeline up by itself. It's going to go through each stage. Now, each of these stages is customizable. You guys could add a testing phase, double testing phase. And it went all right. It's going to create the new image and hopefully deploy it. Get that deployed, it should get it. So I'm getting a 404 not found. This is due to the image. So if you get something like this, you need to basically find a way to delete that image. So if that image was created before this, you're going to need to go in and delete it. And to do that, you would basically Hang on, let me see if I could find something here. Because this is an updated script. The previous one didn't have a check for if, the image was there. You would literally have to run the pipeline, build automatically, and it will create the image initially. And if once you start building it, it will start, removing it. But this one, for some reason, my code didn't work, and I apologize for that. But we are going to see if we can fix it and get the pipeline back up. Let's see here. Go into my Jenkins file. Change this. Give me a second. Okay, you guys, sorry about that. So we had to change basically the remove previous, image to this. I'm gonna go ahead and update it on our GitHub repository. So what this does is it basically it's gonna look for an image called this. But in your guys' sake, you guys are going to have to, go into your server and run this command. Image, and the one that says repository my app, you're going to go ahead and get that, copy that, and paste it into that my app file. So in my case, it's going to be pipe.myapp. Now, every time you, build using the pipeline, it's going to find that and remove it. The reason why it didn't pop up in hello endpoint is because the image that we were using was the one prior. And when the pipeline was going through, it didn't remove that old image and replace it with this new one. So now that we have that, let's try to see if that actually does the trick and makes our pipeline work again. We're gonna go to git status. Okay, then we're gonna do git add, and we're gonna do git commit, update the project one more time, and we're gonna push it, go back into our pipeline, and you should start seeing a number 4 start getting built, which it is. It's gonna go through the pipeline, see if it doesn't error out. Hopefully it doesn't. Okay, it went through. It removed the previous one and it deployed. Perfect. So now if we were to go in our, thing again, and we just hit submit, and the method is not allowed because it's not a get, it's not a post, it's a get. So we should see hello stranger. And that is a feature that we added, using the pipeline. So in short terms, that's how you create a pipeline for Jenkins using a Spring Boot application and Maven. I hope this tutorial was informative and it helped. If you got any questions, my Instagram will be tagged in the video, and you guys can send me a message through there asking for some help or my email. I appreciate you guys watching this video, and I'll see you guys on the next tutorial.